is a bit explosive one. We have ended with the presenters who did not start with. Daryl Wagner, my friend, remains in the United States. Mehul Dave's second one remains in Singapore. And after spending 2 nights and 1 more quarter day on Bangkok airport, got the flight day before, only in the late evening. Well, these are explosive times, as I said. So the current topic, which we start with, is exponential actuary. So the replacement presenters are Simon Dai, followed by Ophelia. I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. Oh, thank you. Now, we will, the speakers will stop one after the other at 9:40, allowing 5 minutes for question and answers, if any. And so the first session will be over, and we'll have a break of some 2 minutes, and then we'll start with the second one. So my dear friends, we have Simon and Ophelia. Who will speak first between Simon and Ophelia? Simon, okay. Well, friends, when I say I don't mean I. Where is written here I? You understand it as Simon. Lest I commit mistakes, I am reading what is written. I, that means Simon. I am a partner in life insurance practice of Deloitte, based in Hong Kong. I serve the insurance industry with a specific focus on giving strategic and operational advice to insurers, leveraging my technical, financial, and actuarial skills. I joined Deloitte in 2013 from HSBC Insurance. At one time, my employer as well. So we are co-brothers. During my time with HSBC, I served in a variety of Hong Kong and regional sales, including the chief actuary of Hong Kong Insurance, which is the second largest business unit of HSBC Insurance globally. That's what HSBC is. Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation. That is started more than 100 years back, right in Hong Kong. And the second office was in India, which still remains. My overall responsibilities include product strategy and pricing, financial reporting, risk management, capital management, and business strategy. I don't know what is left. More recently, I have been heavily involved in various IFRS 17 activities, and these activities have given me unique insights to the significant operational challenges of this new accounting standard. Well, friends, let's start straightway with exponential actuary. It starts with somewhere here is a beautiful presentation with exponential profession, and I hope we have interesting times ahead. Come, please.
Hi, my name is Simon Dai, so thanks for the introduction. And this is clearly originally going to be done by 2 other people, but then unfortunately it's due to the typhoon, they can't come. So this is going to be my second presentation in the conference. All right. You may wonder what that name suggests, exponential actuary. You should note that it's a trademark by trademarked thing, and we chose that phrase because it's you know the exponential function, it goes up very quickly. So I think what that means is that the actuaries needs to do a lot more things and a lot quicker. So how do we do that? And I think in the following presentation you're going to see a very new way of thinking, if you like, of what actuaries do. and it's highly relevant for technologies. Clearly not those two guys. Now, this is what we're going to have. So I'm not going to read out the slide, but I think you get the point. Technology is fast changing, and it's creating new techniques, and it's creating new way of doing things for a lot of people. And that's going to affect how we do our work, be it whether you're an actuary or whether you are an accountant or whether you are someone else. It's just going to change the way you live, change the way you do your work. And these numbers here, it's mostly to indicate the pace of change. I think the pace of change is important because we all know that technology is changing every day. But then the pace of change, it's creating an opportunity for us, but it's also creating risks for the profession, because I think if you think about it, some of you may have worked for a bit longer than me. Back in the days, if you think about it, actuaries were not even using computers. It wasn't that long ago, actually. I still remember when I started working, I worked in a consulting firm with a partner who has now since retired. He told me that when he started working, there was no computer. And imagine the type of work that you're doing now without a computer. It's almost impossible. And then, obviously, since then, the world has computer, and then we started doing a lot more things. And then, I think the invention, I guess, of spreadsheets even has changed a lot of the way we do things. And then the arrival of these actual projection softwares in probably the mid-90s has again changed what we do. And then if you are younger, then you'll see that the introduction of asset modeling, stochastic modeling, all these things, it's just a direct result of the availability of better computing power. Without those enhancement in computing powers, it's just not going to be available, not possible. So this is just to say that the pace of change and introduction of new technology is going to change how we do our work. Now, this is how we look at the actual transformation journey. The way we look at it is that there's a clear need for the profession to transform because of the arrival of some of the new technologies. I think that's why many people are here upstairs listening to Tencent about AI, and I'm sure everybody's interested in that kind of thing. The way that we do things, I think you will agree that in quite a lot of companies, it's still rather manual. It's rather, if you don't mind me saying, it's rather low tech. And then moving from low tech to high tech requires a transformation. That's the definition of that word. And we sometimes also use the word modernization, which is more or less the same thing. And if you think about, look at this chart, there are many aspects of this transformation. So you want to know about many things like data, models, process changes, operating model, and talent. These are all the things that need to be changed. On the right-hand side, you can see all the new technologies that's going to affect what we do. And on the bottom, I'm not sure I should put all the logos there, but I did. My colleagues did anyway. About all the new vendors, none of these are traditional actuarial system vendors, but then they are pretty well-known vendors. For example, some of these are RPA vendors like UiPath, Automation Anywhere. These are RPA tools. But without telling you about the nature of each of these vendors, you should know that these are new technologies. These companies are all very new. These are new technologies that will be made available to all of us. I would use an example here. So think about an actuarial process. I'm sure you've come across very bad processes, and you have been part of a very bad process. There are two ways to look at a process change and automation. So one way to look at it is, which some companies do, is to just throw RPA tools to really bad process. And then you just save the really painful manual work anyway, but then the heart of the problem is still a bad process. The other way to look at it is you streamline the process first, and then you automate it and make it even better. Yeah? So there are two ways to look at a transformation. But clearly, depending on where you are and depending on the availability of your resources, you may need to do it in different ways. Yeah? Now, this is just to set the scene now, because I think I need to hurry up. We, as a profession, have been educating ourselves a lot through exams, through degrees, and all the work, all that. But then, despite the fact that we are, we consider ourselves some, intelligent people, we are, drowning ourselves in a lot of manual data crunching work, a lot of manual process work that is quite strange, I guess, if you look at other industries, and then if you also look at the strengths or the talent of the people in the profession. So very talented people who directly or indirectly created some really bad processes and can get away from the bad processes. That's the amazing part, right? But clearly there are all kinds of good reasons why that's the case. I'm a culprit in some cases, but then because of the manual intensive work processes that we all face, it significantly hold back our productivity. And more importantly, it affects our ability as a profession to add value to the business because we are drowning ourselves in tedious processes. Clearly, there's a lot of value to be gained if we have the ability to automate our work better and to increase our insights better. And that's almost cliche, and I think I heard the same sort of themes even 20 years ago when we all start, I think when we attend these conferences. But what happens nowadays is that the availability of the new technologies, it's starting to make it possible, right? So this is another way to look at how this transformation works. I want to look at the middle, the light blue bit, which is the technology bit, natural language processing, machine learning, all these things. I'm sure you've heard about these things as a phrase anyway, but then if you dive deeper, the concepts are not difficult. The execution is difficult. The concepts are not difficult. And I think on the right-hand side, you can see that you need to have a very open-minded way of looking at how you structure your company. And then on the left-hand side, there's a lot of domain knowledge. And combining domain knowledge, the new technologies, and an organizational change ability, then you can create a transformed workforce. Okay? We can look at it as a workforce. We can also look at it as a profession. Generally how that works in practice is that if you go to your company, back to your company, and try to conduct a workshop, and you gather a bunch of actuaries together, you ask them, what would you like to do better? Normally, they'll be able to give you some ideas, but I think more often, they will give you ideas which are constrained by what they know, because if you know of an opportunity to improve, you would have done it already because it's in your interest to do so. So I think what we have seen is that by combining actuaries with some of the technology people who know of these new technologies, machine learning technologies, RPA technologies, by combining the skills of these two types of people in a workshop could create a lot of new thinking. I've been to some of these workshops. It's quite amazing what new technologies making things available, like natural language processing, for example. I'm half believing it, but then I'm told that you can actually have a machine read documents for you, and that's one. Some of the predictive analytics and machine learning capabilities means that you can have a machine do your experience studies for you, instead of you taking in the data, doing all the sums and the products. You can actually have a machine do that all for you in 1 second. Not quite 1 second, but very short time. Imagine a world where you can actually, spare all the time that you do with your data, and then you can see your analysis of experience in a very short time. Then that will clearly free up a lot of your time to analyze such experience. Yeah. Okay. This is another chart that we use to highlight the journey. So Even technology has different sort of strengths, if you like. On the left-hand side, these are the sort of less impact technologies. RPA, you may have heard of the word RPA, the phrase RPA, robotic process automation. That's just really, my colleagues hate me saying that, but that's a smart macro. It is a smart macro. It's more expensive macro, it's a more powerful macro, but it's a smart macro. But you of all people, I think we are all four people understand the power of a macro, if you like. You just have a robot doing it for you, yeah? And it's a much more macro, clearly, when you do it. And there are a lot more things you can do with RPA. I've seen RPA being done in HR, for example, and in claims, in underwriting, basically all kinds of form filling stuff. You can have a machine do it for you. And then moving to the right, you can have intelligent automation, some sort of human judgments, and then you can have cognitive stuff, and then you have AI on the right-hand side. Basically, when you get to the AI stage, then you can have machine thinking for you. But then I think the availability of AI is there, but then I think there's clearly the people upstairs, the Tencent guys would know a lot better than I do, but then I think that cross-domain AI is still very difficult. So the AI guys can play chess very well, play Go very well, but then if you need to use AI to help you use the same machine who play chess very well to do your IFRS 17 implementation, then I think it's a bit of a stretch for even a robot. So I think the AI has a lot of potential, don't get me wrong, but then making it possible so that it's relevant for us, it's still not quite there. Okay. Now, here's going to come as the less boring part. So my colleagues is showing this is what a factory looks like. When you work in the factories, this is what a factory looks like. This is how we work. I think your office probably looks more or less like that. A lot of people, a lot of machines, all that. Very 9 to 5, or maybe not quite 9 to 5, hopefully. Sitting in front of a screen, you type, you run the model, and you talk to your bosses and all that. Now, this looks fancier, but it's not very fancy. But it's a different workspace. You can actually see the guy working on multiple screens. That's fancier. But what would we look like in future as we work? Now, let's see that video. Thank you.
Exponential technologies such as artificial intelligence, cognitive automation, and crowdsourcing are disrupting business, upending entire industries, and changing the face of work at an ever-increasing rate. These technologies could disrupt your business, or they can be leveraged to take a fresh approach to what you do day to day, driving value, saving time, and reducing costs. They can take away the mundane, everyday tasks that often stifle your employees and free them to better add value to your business, help it grow, or spend more time with your stakeholders. In the professional world, leveraging these technologies means enabling your employees to spend more time on what matters. For example, actuaries spend lots of time accessing and preparing data for analysis. Is the data ready for use, complete and accurate? To automate the process of obtaining and remediating data, to reduce time wrangling data, and increase time driving insights from it, so that most of the analysis can be streamlined and augmented by a cognitive application. The remaining workload is where we can use our time effectively and efficiently. We found that the majority of actuarial memos can be drafted by machine via our cognitive communication platform. We can then spend more time and effort fine-tuning the end product and communicating person to person. And by including a document management solution, access control, versioning and editing is a snap, creating even more time for customer discussions. Increasing the return on your actuarial function by making it more efficient and enhancing your ability to deliver strategic and value-added insights increases the return on your most valuable asset, your people.
So, thank you. So, I'm going to pass the time to my colleagues soon, but then before I do that, you may so far find that all these things are very theoretical and you don't feel that it's hitting you. There are two examples I want to give you to make you feel a bit more real. The first one is more affecting my company, and you may know that we do audit work, and you also may know that in audit work, you may be the target of our audits, but then we clearly talk to you a lot, but then we have to produce lots of internal documents so that we have evidence to show to regulators that we have actually reviewed stuff properly. And you can imagine that as you produce this, what we call audit memo, they're very similar documents that you produce in large volumes every year. And that's a very mundane task for our people. We have, so far as I know, used these technologies to streamline the production of these audit memos so that we can actually produce something like 100 memos in a few hours. Clearly, it cannot replace the audit work that we do, but then it can actually replace the work that we do in producing the documents, which is very mundane. The second example I want to give is pricing. So I think you know that in life insurance, maybe in some other, less so in general insurance, but more life insurance, a lot of companies in Asia are still using Excel to do pricing. And you can probably appreciate the difficulties in using Excel. I've come to realize that there are, some of these technologies have evolved to the point where there are tools available to help you automate the whole process with pricing. And you can almost click a button and then you can see all the pricing results with sensitivities, everything in one go. More importantly, not just the process of producing pricing information, they can also use predictive analytics techniques. If you feed in the right data to the pricing tool that's available out there, you can actually see a lot more insightful pricing. And apparently that will do your company a lot of good if you can actually embrace the new technology to do pricing better. So these are some of the real things that's happening, and I've got the privilege to talk to some of these technology owners, and I can't talk on behalf of them, but I have to assure you that a lot of these things are really happening for real, and they are quite impactful. Okay, now I would like to pass the time to my colleague Ophelia Ouyang, and she will give you a bit more context on actuarial profession. All right.
All right, good morning, everyone. I would like to go back a bit to the two pictures. So now here we see a lot of actuaries working very diligently in our office. This is like how we work today. And in this photo, just maybe a number of years away from now, what I see in this picture is we only have like one actuary, but with a lot of data at his fingertip. So my immediate reaction is that will actuaries be replaced by technology? Technology is like a threat to our profession or but over the last few days in this conference, I've gained a lot of reassurance from like a lot of the speakers and even the chief executive of Hong Kong SAR, like Mrs. Carrie Lam. I'm glad to hear that like actuary is actually one of the 11 professions like in demand and on the talent list to attract like quality professionals to work in Hong Kong. Now, this reassurance aside, the CEOs, like from their panel discussion yesterday, did say that we are very good at the technical space, so doing very complex like stochastic modeling and so on. But then they do see us as having a much bigger role in partnering with them to provide more business insights to run a better business. So this brings us to the idea of the exponential actuary, like the trademark of our future. Now, so exponential actuary, like Simon has given his view on what like exponential means. But to me, this means like elevating ourselves to the next level, doing something different, like tasks that are different from today's, and working in a different way. Now, with this notion in mind, then I think we've got two questions to answer. First of all, so what tasks can be better done by technology? And second, of course, like how is one going to implement the new technology? So now let's look at the what first. Now, ideally, we would like technology to help us address our pain points. So some of these, I'm sure these are not new to anyone. Like you must have gone through at least one or a number of these pain points in your career. For example, like spreadsheets. I mean, it's not surprising that one manages like hundreds of spreadsheets, because when one spreadsheet fails to do what we wanted it to do, we create another spreadsheet to address the problem, and we end up like often having hundreds of spreadsheets. Another classic one is the regular, like the production, financial production process, where like it's still quite common that we may have team members staying up quite late in the office, having to wait for a certain file to be ready, and then they need to press some kind of button in the actuarial model, make sure that the run goes okay, and then that the boss can get the results in the next day. Now, so these are all very painful experiences, and what is common across these pain points is that a lot of these tasks tend to be quite labor-intensive, and they follow certain predefined rules. There is not very much like a professional judgment involved, and they oftentimes tend to be quite time-consuming. But these tasks are exactly the ones that the machines are good at. So machines are best at identifying and applying algorithms in doing all these repetitive tasks. So the notion of the exponential actuary is to deploy technology to help us do all this work and to free ourselves up to do more of the analysis of the results and to communicate the results to our stakeholders. Now, if we look at this, this diagram, it further categorizes the activities that we now do into 3 buckets. So we have got ideation on this one end, which includes activities like studying market trends, identifying business opportunities. In the middle, we've got computation, which includes like our reserve calculations, designing and running our pricing and valuation models. And at this end of the spectrum, we've got application and decision making, where we start analyzing our results, forming some business insights, and communicating them to the stakeholders. Now, if you look at this line, now we tend to spend most of our time on this, in this middle bar doing computation work. And we spend relatively less time like studying market trends or talking to the stakeholders about what we think or how we think the business can be run better. Now, the middle area is where we think we should use more automation and the new technology to do the work, to free ourselves up to do more of the thinking. So these are where the actuaries will bring value and insights to the business. Now let's imagine, like when we say bring in new technology to help us do the computation work, then in fact the technology that is required to do that already exists. So Simon mentioned a number of the third-party vendors, so like Blue Prism or other automation software vendors. So if we imagine using a number of those tools, what our daily life will look like in the future. So first of all, we no longer have to have a colleague like waiting in the office like quite late at night for certain files to be ready and then clicking the button. So in the future, a lot of the production work will have been done by the robot, so overnight. So at 5 a.m., like very early in the morning, we can expect the results to have been like run by the actuarial model. And then we deployed another software, the Tableau, to help us like refresh the data automatically, just like within 1 hour. And then another tool, like the natural language generator, this is where a software can recognize like certain keywords that you like predefine in the software, and then whenever the software sees or detects the keyword, it will help you update the report. So even like in the future, you may not need to write your monthly report or the narratives. So the reports are automatically updated. And very soon, the chief actuary will get the reports and the results, and within like 15 minutes, he or she will already have the ability to drill down. So not only having a report at hand, but the ability to drill down into the details of the results. So if we look at this timeline, starting from 5 a.m. to 8:15, that's about three hours and a bit more. So this is like shortening the whole production cycle immensely. And also, I think this will be very helpful to companies that have been trying to shorten their production timeline. So I've got one client, like some good friends of mine, who have been trying very hard to reduce the production cycle. And every department has to put in some effort, and maybe like one activity shortens the production timeline by, let's say, half an hour. So they still struggle to produce results by, let's say, 3 days after month end. But look at the chart. In the future, like with all these different technologies deployed, we can expect to shorten the timeline by like within maybe like T+1, like 1 day after month end is no longer impossible. Now, with all the technologies like out there in the market that we can purchase, I think like how a lot of the clients that we talk to, they would like to know like how to get started. Before we look into, like, in my opinion, the opportunity log is not the first thing that you need. I think the first thing is a mindset change. Because we are so good at our technical area, and we take pride in doing that, it is very hard to give up what you have been doing for years and then you feel very comfortable with. So I think to start implementing or embracing the idea of the exponential actuary is to have a mindset change. And I think mindset doesn't only mean trying to do something new, but also to have an open mindset to talk to different people within the industry as well as in your company. Because as Simon said, this whole implementation of technology doesn't involve just the actuaries. In fact, we encourage the actuaries to start talking to the IT people to understand what is feasible within the company, like in the current IT infrastructure, what is the immediate, like the quick wins to do in the current phase, and what is the company's overall IT infrastructure plan, and how that connects with the actuarial team's like overall strategy. And I think the second thing that you need still is not the opportunity log, is some skill set change. Now, we are very strong in how we do our technical, like all the calculations and computation work. But to play the role of a business partner or the exponential actuary, we need some new skills, in particular the soft skills, such as communications and working with other people. Now, I'm a fellow of the Society of Actuaries, and I recently visited the SOA website. And I can see that the society has recently redesigned, or maybe not recently, but they have redesigned the whole actuarial profession competency framework. Now, there are 9 attributes that the SOA thinks actuaries, like current actuaries or even future actuaries, must have. Technical strength is only one of the 9 attributes. And the other ones include communications, interpersonal collaboration, leadership, and industry knowledge. So I can see already like a change in how the training to the future actuaries will be done to equip them to become the future, like the exponential actuary. So I think not just the future actuaries have to go on for like a different curriculum, but we as like the more experienced actuaries, we may need to have like a mindset change plus strengthening some of our other soft skills to help us play a better business partner role to our own company. Now, of course, to take a first step in implementing this whole exponential actuary, like to embark on a journey, most of the time, companies will start with like a current state analysis and see where all the pain points are. Of course, we have listed out some of the common ones, but the pain points could be different, or some companies may have their own unique ones. So a lot of the times, there is like a workshop with the finance and actuarial team sitting together to walk through the whole process and identify pain points that can be addressed. So this is where like our colleagues, like based on their past experience with other companies in the US and in Southeast Asia, they will start the opportunity log and discuss and log where like automation and like the training and where like the technology deployment opportunities are. With all these, we encourage companies to talk to IT and then with maybe HR to identify like a roadmap that can be executed to get the company to embark on the journey of the exponential actuary. Okay. Okay. I think given the time, before I go to the key takeaways, just would like to share like one example with you where this like RPA, so what Simon called the smart macro. So there are already some real life example in the industry where companies have written their own program. So not so much buying third-party software in the market, but having the IT department support them in writing their own program to enable what they call, what we know as a one-click production process. So for that particular company, with only one click of the program, the robot would detect the arrival of the evaluation extract, so some files from the admin system. With that detection, the model point file preparation process is automatically triggered. And with the model point files ready, there is another trigger to start the actuarial model run. And all the subsequent tasks are automatically done with this macro. And that you can imagine how much human capital this company has saved. So just to share with you, there are already real-life examples out there, and then you do not have to think that you need to start this journey with like buying some expensive software in the market. You can start thinking about like where you can put improvements into your process, and talking to your IT and see how they can help you with writing your own program. And I believe IFRS 17, like the other topic covered by Simon on day one, is going to be a catalyst for thinking quite hard on this topic, because in the future world, you will have to do much more complex calculations and yet in the same time frame. So I think when IFRS 17 comes, this whole like automation and technology, in my opinion, I don't think it's a nice to have. I think it's going to be essential given the complexity and the amount of work in the future reporting world. Now, so I will just close by saying that the digital age has come. So I think it's now time for us actuaries to embrace this new idea of like the exponential actuary and start thinking about how to use technology to help us with our day-to-day work, and start thinking about how we can add more value to the business. So I can see that the time has run up. Maybe I'll invite Simon to come back and see if he has any closing remarks or any questions from the floor, given the time.
James, oh, sorry. You can shout, James.
Yeah. Don't you think that the nature of our work is going to become much more stochastic? So what we've got in computing power now, way less than what we need in the future. So AI is going to take us. The questions I want to ask in pricing are: yes, that's your pricing, taking its free notes to generate, but I want all these other scenarios, and I want social effects to be brought in.
Yes.
So that's, I think, the fundamental difference from the future. You know.
Yes.
My biggest worry is seeing one person there. I don't believe you will see one person asking these questions.
Yeah.
And I think someone said to me that I look down now. I don't do this maths. I get other people to do lots of maths, but I keep running into the limitations of the maths that they do. Yeah? And that's one of the things I think AI is going to change. I'm the chief actuary. I'm going to be asking a lot more questions, more stochastic questions, sometimes sarcastic, okay? But I do think that's where this fundamental shift is coming from. It's actually taking it, I think already managers at the top know we live in a risk world. What we haven't yet done is translate that into computer systems that are giving us other answers. And I want the future actuaries to do that.
Yes, thank you, James, for the comment. I think that's actually aligned with what we'll say here. So free up people's time to do the real things that you just...
No, I don't think you have any free time. You're going to have more time to do more complex things.
Well, free time to do to not do what we do now. But anyway.
Good. Thank you, sir. It was more of an answer than question, but nevertheless, it was enlightening.
Thank you.
We should keep in mind, can you? Yeah, that's it. The first slide, can you put it the first? Outlook for the future is bright. So keep that in mind. And thanks, the right team. The first slide, I don't know the first slide.
Oh, you want to have the first
The first
slide.
one, because there will be photo point in future this way. I want your first slide. Yeah, that's
Okay.
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 Yeah, please be seated.
Thank you. So no need to-
Thank you. him, and we will close it at about 10:25, allowing 5 minutes for question and answers. Tomohiro, please.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everyone for your time. So my name is Tomohiro, and I have worked in Japan for several years as a pension actuary, and I used to work at Mazda Philippines to take an actuarial role as well. So, and having spent some time in these countries, I thought I came to notice that there are some different, not only differences, but also commonalities between the pension plans in these countries in terms of making efforts to ensure financial security post-retirement life, or in other words, financial wellness for individuals working there. So I thought a combination of these countries would give you a kind of spectrum of interesting aspects when it comes to retirement or pension plans. I'm going to. Okay, all right, thank you. So I'm going to talk about some introductory stuff about country-specific matters, but I hope this will give you a sense of what kind of thing you can do in relation to your daily work. So to begin with, let me give you a comparison of these two countries, showing some economic statistics. In terms of population, actually, Japan has 127 million people, while in the Philippines there are around 100 million people. So, and in the size of population, these countries are somewhat similar, but in terms of GDP per capita, actually, Japanese GDP per capita is more than 10 times that in the Philippines, as you can see. But obviously, Japan's economic growth is now stable at a lower level as compared to the Philippines. So the gap between those GDP per capita may be close somehow over the next decades. And most importantly, I show you the median age as of 2015. You may have attended the session on the day one of Mr. Dale. He mentioned that Japan is the second oldest nation across the world following Monaco. But Philippines is quite young, it's obvious, because the median age is 24, and it's almost a half of that of Japan. So this will make some difference when we think of retirement benefit or pension programs in those countries, but I would like to introduce some information about Japanese pension programs first. The market practice or market landscape, as well as legislative updates or regulatory initiatives that the government in this country is trying to implement. So this is kind of wordy, but this is the overview of Japanese pension plans covering 3 pillar models ranging from the state pension plan to individual occupational pension scheme. When we say Pillar 3 model, Tier 1 and Tier 2 covers state pension programs. Tier 2 pension is for state pension benefits only for those who work at private organizations or private corporations. And on top of those Tier 1 and Tier 2 pension programs, we have a range of occupational pension scheme options, such as defined contribution pension plan, as well as funded defined benefit pension plan. And in addition to a private pension scheme as part of Tier 3, individual savings scheme is currently gaining acceptance to some extent, but this is yet to be developed from what I understand. Because in Japan, as you may know, lifetime employment has been one of common market practices. And most of the public largely rely on what they are going to, or what they are supposed to get from the government and from the company they have devoted their time to. So on the Tier 1 and Tier 2 pension system, as I'm going through, there are some solvency issues given the aging population in Japan. And when it comes to Tier 3, for occupational pension scheme, the trend toward from defined benefit pension program to DC, or defined contribution pension scheme, is prevalent in Japan too, in light of a private corporation's preference to mitigate the financial risks they have to bear as a result of sponsoring defined benefit pension schemes. And when it comes to individual savings scheme, as I said, this is under development, I guess. There is a variety of individual savings scheme or products offered by financial institutions, but the majority of the public largely dependent on the state pension and occupational pension schemes. So these are the very important parts when we think of Japanese pension plans. This slide shows the difficulty that state pension benefits in Japan are facing. This bar shows the blue bar as the revenue of state pension benefits in form of insurance premiums collected by individuals. And the red bar indicates the expenses. The Japanese state pension benefits are run on a pay-as-you-go basis. So basically, all the premiums collected in a year is paid out to pensioners within the same year. And it's obvious that the expense has been increasing around 2.2% over decades, which is actually much higher than the economic growth rate, as I showed at the previous page. So the Japanese government is struggling to sort out this issue. So this issue came from primarily a longevity issue. As you could see at the first slide, the life expectancy of the Japanese public is already more than 80, which is good in a way, but from financial perspectives or solvency perspectives, it's one of issues that the government is really struggling to deal with. And also, the median age is already 46, so meaning that the whole cohort of the Japanese public is already starting to heavily weigh on the elder population. So we used to have around 2.8 person per one pensioner in 2010 to support his or her financial security post-retirement life, but we had only 2.3 in 2015, and this number is drastically decreasing. and it's supposed to continue to decrease, unfortunately. So to address this issue, the Japanese government has already implemented a labor reform to push back the pension commencement age for state pension benefits to 65, but this is going to be much more in the future. And this slide shows how the state pension and occupational pension schemes help people meet their financial needs post-retirement life. So on the bottom side, so state pension benefits is supposed to pay around 220,000 Japanese yen per month, which is thought to be around 50 to 60% of the final monthly pay immediately before the retirement. And when it comes to occupational pension scheme, the typical amounts of retirement benefits paid from the corporate sponsored occupational pension scheme is around 27 million Japanese yen in lump sum at age 60. So if we convert this into annuity, with zero interest rates, it's worth around 102,000 Japanese yen per month. So combining those amounts, we have around 320,000 Japanese yen per month for a while, following age 60 or 65. But there's a survey that indicates around 350,000 Japanese yen are required to enable typical household to spend comfortable life post-retirement. So it's obvious that there's a gap between what they will have at retirement and what they will need after retirement. As of now, most of Japanese households diligently saving their money, mostly on bank accounts, rather than making investments or asset management to earn investment returns. But basically, to fill the gap between what they have and what they need, they accumulate their salary in the bank accounts to decumulate the amount of money they have in bank account to meet the financial gap, in addition to what they can enjoy from pension plans. So, in summary, although there are some variety of pension plans in Japan in place, the existing pension plans, especially state pension benefits and occupational pension scheme, are facing some difficulties, and the sponsoring organizations such as government and private corporation are getting away from taking risks for individuals. So the responsibility for the individuals on financial security handed over from the government or private corporations to individuals. So we expect state pension benefits to be diminished in due course somehow, unfortunately. And corporate pension scheme also will be transformed to a plan with less risks to be borne by employer, meaning that individuals or employees will need to take care more of their own financial needs and financial benefits. And the individual savings scheme will play a greater role than ever to address the pension benefits paid from the above two pension schemes are going to be decreased somehow. So To sort out this situation, the Japanese government has implemented some regulatory initiatives and implemented labor code reform. So I'm going to introduce some important information on those two issues. So one of which is for occupational pension scheme, and another one is for another one is to enable individuals to make the most of the individual savings scheme available in Japan. So the first one, the first legislative update in relation to Japanese pension plan is for occupational pension scheme, which has less risks to employers. This is what we call risk-sharing ZB, and this is something equal to the pension scheme that's called collective DC in some countries, such as UK or Netherlands. On the left-hand side, you can see the traditional DB. So how an employer make contribution to traditional defined benefit pension programs in Japan. We have future service benefit. We have normal contribution to cover future service benefits upon plan implementation. And if there's any past service benefits that cannot be covered by this normal contribution, then employer has to pay a special contribution. And if these two contributions doesn't meet the funding target based on the plan design, then employer has to pay a funding deficit contribution. And this is where DB risks came into play, because this is the amount of money employers has to pay to make sure employees can receive the benefits as promised. But under risk-sharing ZB, this funding deficit contribution is changed into risk contribution, which is already fixed based on the amount of expected deficit, which has to be agreed in advance of the implementation of this risk DB between employees and employer. So I will walk you through how this contribution works under risk-sharing DB scheme. So we have three charts and for three funding scenarios. Case 2 is the baseline. So we have, as balance sheet components, we have funded assets and present value of future contribution on the right, on the left-hand side of the balance sheet, and on the right-hand side, we have present value of future benefits. And under risk sharing ZB, we define some amounts of expected deficit, which works as a funding buffer. And as long as the total of present value of contributions and assets, the difference between the total of the present value of contribution and assets and the present value of benefits is within the expected deficit, then employer has to do nothing and just keep paying a contribution as promised. And if the investment performance is better than expected or anticipated, then we can go to case 1 scenario. Because the total of present value of contribution and assets is greater than the total of present value of benefits and expected deficit, so there's a room for benefit improvement. According to the pre-agreed rules between employees and employer, to make the most of the monetary value that this plan is going to enjoy, this plan can improve the level of benefit accordingly. And on the right-hand side, we can also see case 3 under which the investment performance goes worse than anticipated. because the total of present value of contribution and assets is less than even the present value of future benefits. The sum of present value of contribution and assets are not going to be able to cover the future benefits anymore. So the level of benefit needs to be lowered. This was implemented in 2017, and there are just a few employers sponsoring this scheme. But just recently, one of huge traditional Japanese companies has implemented this scheme. So it attracts some attention from the market because it will give the market a sense of how this scheme will work in the future. Summarizing the key characteristics of this risk-sharing GB, so this is something that enables both employers and employee to share retirement risks, so defined benefit risks. And from employer's perspective, this can be accounted as a DC from accounting perspective. So this is for what some employers consider to set up risk-sharing DB instead of traditional defined benefit or defined contribution pension plan, if their employees prefer some type of defined benefit pension benefits to defined contribution scheme. So this is so to be striking some good balance between the existing DB and DC by some stakeholders, but there are some possible challenges and which prevent many employers from actually putting this in place. Number one is that number one point is that there are still risks, and this has to be shared by employees and employers. So, meaning risk-sharing DB does not eliminate or mitigate risks in total. And number two, from my opinion, this is more important. There's a potential source of conflict of interest when we try to set up this risk-sharing DB because it's obvious that so if we pay more risk contribution to the scheme, then there will be more room for future benefit improvements. But it can be done at employers' cost. So employers will like to reduce the amounts of risk contribution as much as possible. So there's a conflict of interest between employees and employer in when they try to determine the amount of risk contribution. And the second source of conflict of interest is that within this scheme, there's a spectrum of employees in terms of seniority or age. So in a typical situation, those who are close to retirement we will prefer some conservative investments, mostly based on fixed income security or some bank deposit. But younger generation will prefer more aggressive investments based on equity or even some emerging country securities. So many employers are just wondering whether risk-sharing DB is something they should take into account to address the current issue. Not figuring out how to deal with these potential conflicts of interest. So we will need some more time to observe how the new how employers who have already implemented this risk-sharing DB can manage those potential issues. And let me walk you through the second legislative update, which is in relation to individual savings scheme in Japan. This is some statistics as of 2014. I show these statistics as of 2014 just to just wanting to give you the reality at the time when this initiative was contemplated. At the time, around 4.5 million people was covered by corporate-sponsored defined contribution pension scheme following the inception of corporate-sponsored defined contribution pension scheme in 2002. So it had already been around 1 decade from inception of defined contribution pension scheme in Japan. And only 0.2 million people were covered by individual-based DC, which was also implemented at the same time as corporate-sponsored defined contribution pension scheme. But when we take a look at the entire universe of potential DC participants, there were around 68 million people. We typically categorize the national public who can be covered by pension schemes into 3 categories as per the definitions of the state pension benefits. And class 1 insured is self-employed employee, self-employed persons, and there were around 80 million people at that time. And sorry, this was typo, but there are around 40 million people who were employed and who were working for a private organization or corporations. And there were also around 10 million people who were spouses or family members of class 2 insured, which is called a class 3 insured. So although it had already been around 10 years from the inception of DC, the entire DC scheme could cover on less than 10% of the public, and given the 10 years passed at the time, the penetration rate per year was less than 1%. So the Japanese government wanted to change the situation to encourage individuals to take more initiatives or responsibilities to manage their own assets by their own, and encourage them to manage their entire financial assets, given that state pension benefits or private corporations benefits may be diminished in due course. So what was done in 2007 is to expand the coverage of individual defined contribution pension scheme. Before this change, individual defined contribution pension scheme was available only for class 1 insured and class 2 insured who doesn't take part in the private corporation-sponsored pension scheme. But this was expanded literally all the public, and the government is now has been doing some campaign to promote the scheme to the market. And as of now, this 0.2 million people has been increased to 0.8 million people. So just during 1 or 2 years, the government has succeeded in increasing the number of participants of individual DC around 4 times. So this momentum will keep going. So let me move on to this is the overview of Japanese pension plan, and let me move on to the Philippine ones. In the Philippines, actually, there is some mandatory pension benefits in the Philippines as well. And the Pillar 1 is social security system. And this was implemented and amended in 1997. And this pays around 50 to 130 US dollar per month from age 60. And Pillar 2 is occupation retirement benefits, which requires employers pay a minimum mandatory benefits at retirement, subject to some conditions. When it comes to the mandatory minimum retirement benefits paid from a private organization, there's some rigid definitions, but we can simply think of the amount of retirement benefit payable upon retirement from the company is equal to around 75% times the monthly basic salary at retirement times years of service. This is the minimum amount of money a private corporation has to pay to employees at retirement. And there are also supplemental pension schemes employers can put in place on top of the mandatory minimum pension benefits. Actually, defined benefit program is more prevalent, but there's a strong trend to change the DB plan from DB plan to DC plan. The typical design of DB supplemental defined benefit plan is very similar to minimum pension benefits, and defined contribution schemes design is really similar to what we observe in other markets. So it's the total of contribution plus accumulated investment returns. And when it comes to so when we think of whether these pension benefits are sufficient or not to enable individuals to meet their financial needs post-retirement, there is potential gap between what they will have and what they will need as well in the Philippines. Because social security system pays only 50 to 130 US dollar from age 60, which is thought to be around 40 to 60% of the monthly pay at retirement. But there's a great gap between the highly compensated and the others. So it really depends on how much they can receive from the company at retirement. And occupational pension scheme can potentially pay around 20 to 30 times monthly salary at age 60, depending on the ranks of salary they have devoted to a corporation. But this will be something that this will be equivalent to monthly pension for around 4 to 5 years only. So as of now, the life expectancy of Philippine public is around 66. So this is kind of good enough for the moment, but there will be significant gap in the near future. So in the Philippines, personal savings scheme is also gaining acceptance as well. So to address the needs for individual savings scheme in the Philippines, the government has implemented some scheme, so-called PERA, or personal equity and retirement account, which enable individuals to save their money with some financial products as well as tax advantages. But the market, the Philippine market still needs to figure out how it works, because the law was enacted in 2008 and the guideline was released in 2016. Despite the fact only a few banks offer investment products for this PELA scheme, mainly because the tax benefits of this PELA scheme was not really large. The individuals can enjoy only 10 or 20% of only 10 to 20% of the accumulated assets within this PELA account are tax exempted, although there are a variety of rules they have to meet to enjoy the tax benefits. So basically, this is a good idea, but the tax benefits is not regarded sufficient to give the market a nudge to make the most of this scheme in place. This is the last slide. So let me wrap it up. So in those markets, so despite the difference between the two countries in terms of the level or maturity of economy and the seniority of the public, those countries have traditional pension retirement benefit scheme, with which employer try to secure the financial wellness or financial security post-retirement life for individuals. But from now on, they are trying to change the style to support the employees' financial wellness in a way that employers now consider how they can help employees secure their own financial wellness or financial security post-retirement life by providing information as well as available scheme or products at the best rate, with making most of the bargaining power private corporations may have to asset managers or financial institutions. And also, employers are now really keen to understand what kind of education or information they can give their employees instead of some amounts of money. And so, in a nutshell, employers are changing their mind from the traditional style to a new style by encouraging individuals to think of or manage their financial assets so that they can prepare for the well-being post-retirement life. Okay, that's it. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm more than happy to address any comments or questions that you may have.
Anybody about retirement? So we can